So beautiful good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching us from. This is yours truly, Mr. Panuka from Panuka Farm, right here in Lusaka, Zambia. So about 3 or 4 months ago, I did present a video that we had just constructed a new Shednet made of wood. I think that was the first time we're actually doing a Shednet using wood. I think all along we've using steel poles. And I just thought today I actually give you an update on how this structure is doing, made of wood, and using also some slightly cheaper net. And we're going to do this in contrast with some of the old shed nets that we've got on the farm. And hopefully this will also give you a bit more insights on which direction you can actually take. Remember, I think with farm infrastructure, what you actually just want to make sure is that you don't create white elephants, but even then you also need to make sure that your farm infrastructure can actually last you for years. So we don't want bubblegum kind of infrastructure on the farm. So let's dive into this video. So the big question is whether you should actually go with wood such as this one, or probably you should actually look at having one constructed using steel poles such as this one. With this shed net, like we previously indicated, we actually use these wooden poles, and so far it has actually given us quite a good crop of sweet pepper. From a productivity perspective, I think it's been very good. Some yellow beautiful sweet peppers here, but we use this cheap shed net, which unfortunately it's kind of falling apart. So you can actually see some of the issues that we're facing, and even on the sides there could be some aspects of just the way we constructed it. But generally, I think this net, gives up a bit too easily. And then with the poles, much as they're still, holding up, but obviously, we're seeing, these termites coming through. We actually tried to treat these poles, but probably they are not the treated poles in its truest, sense. But this is what we are actually experiencing. So the cost that we talked about that is probably minimal is the fact that we didn't use those highly treated poles, which probably could have actually been quite expensive. One of the things that we actually loved about using these wooden poles is just the height. You can actually see it helped us to kind of improve the height within the shed net structure. But I think in terms of just the overall structural integrity, it's kind of falling apart a bit too quickly compared to some of the ones that we've actually done with steel. Some of them have been with us for like over 3 years. So the wooden poles are actually quite good, and can actually give you the structural integrity that you actually need. We've actually seen people using these even construction of greenhouses. But I think if you go that route, you've got to make sure that you use highly versatile treated poles. These are still holding up, but I think already we can see they will not actually hold up for many years compared to the steel poles. So if you take this route of the wooden poles, make sure that you get it right. They're really well treated, and it's the type that is used in construction, say, of greenhouses and stuff like that. What you want to avoid is termites chewing up this. So yeah, I think we tried to do a good job, and kind of still holding up, but it's just that we can project that we're not going to have this structure probably not for 4 years or something like that, which we had envisaged. Yeah, so that's just the heads up. So in contrast, let's just check out some of our shed nets that have actually been constructed using steel poles. So the alternative structure that would actually propose is for you to use steel poles as opposed to the wooden ones, unless you're actually very sure that those wooden poles are actually properly treated. And so in contrast to the one that we just showed you where we have wooden poles that are actually falling apart, this one we've had it for like now heading to about 2 years, and we just finished refurbishing it with steel poles. So let me just walk you through this newly refurbished Shednet, and then we'll show you other structures that we've actually used steel poles, so that you can actually see the contrast. So the dimensions of this Shednet is around 20 by 30, so roughly about 600 square meters. And what you see in contrast with the other one that we just showed you is that the first one is the fact that here we used steel poles, and what we just recently did was actually to fill some cement inside these steel poles, and this is the cement that you can actually see overflowing here. It helps just solidify this structure. Then secondly, you actually see that on the walls of this Shednet, we actually have an insect net. It's the same that we actually use for the greenhouses on the side, and then at the top we use a Shednet, 40% Shednet. So you actually see that all the anchor poles, the steel poles, are supported. One characteristic of this net on the side is that it doesn't really allow even so much wind, so you end up with a bit of pressure. So you have to make sure that you anchor the steel poles with some support poles, so that even if the wind pushes, the structure will not buckle up. So we actually had such a situation before we worked on this last week, to just make sure that there's structural integrity of this Shednet, and now it's good to go. So pretty soon this week we're gonna prepare the land for some lettuce, and then come 1st July we putting in some sweet pepper in here. So this is how this Shednet looks like from the outside. So this net that we actually, the combination of nets that we use here, the Shednet and the insect netting, quite a good combination, and quite durable. This is what we'd actually recommend that you use, but obviously that comes with a bit of a price and knock on your wallet, but I think in the interest of longevity on farm infrastructure, I think that should be your focus. So in here you actually see that we've got some steel poles. This is another Shednet. So again, when you compare with the ones that we just did with wood, the level of disintegration I think has been quicker, I think, on the wooden side, but this one is actually the oldest Shednet that we have on the farm. Remember the one we transformed from a DIY greenhouse that collapsed on us, but then this is the oldest Shednet we've got on the farm, and I think now it's heading to about 4 years, and then its structural integrity is really on point. So again, this is why you see that we probably would advocate that you go much more for the steel poles. I think we've seen that the structural integrity is actually much better, and then you've got this net. This is the 40% green net. I think it does a good job. It holds I think similar to the other Shednet that we just showed you, and so it's a tried and tested 40% Shednet that you can actually consider. And then that white net is actually the same one that we actually use also for the greenhouses. So again, I think something that you should probably look at. That's an insect net, and then that's a Shednet. A little different. So that's a 40%, but with this one you actually find that even the wind kind of gets blocked insects and everything. So it's the same like the one that we actually use for the greenhouses. So this has actually quite some very ultimate structural integrity, and that's the more reason we love I think if you've got the money, this is what you should actually go for, as opposed to wood. You've got to get me right. I think we're not really trying to discount the use of wood completely. Probably I think the wood that we used ourselves was not very well treated and stuff like that. We know in the market people have actually used wood with some very good structural in integrity, but I think we quite very sure that if you go for steel poles, certainly they'll actually last much longer compared to wooden poles. So I think there's still good value for money in terms of just payback period. I think the steel poles would actually last you longer. Just make sure that you get the ones with the good thickness. I think 1.6 millimeters, going up 2 millimeter. Those are industrial steel poles that would actually last you longer. If you're going to go for something like 1.2 millimeter, I think that will not take you very far. So yeah, something around 1.62 millimeter, and then 50 the diameter. I think that would take you quite a while. So yeah, so let's just look at the final Shednet just in comparison, so that you see. Again, it's always good that we give you different perspectives, so that you've got quite a few parameters to use when you're making your own judgment on what to do. So both the two nets that we actually use in here, we got them from our greenhouse supplier. That's Haygrove Zambia, or Lima Agro as it were. So yeah, you can just check them out on Facebook. So they've got all these nets. Yeah, so this is our biggest Shednet, 2,500 square meters. But you can actually see that we constructed this using steel poles, and you can actually see the structural integrity is still quite intact. The only issue is that we use a slightly not so durable net. Given the size, I think the cost was a bit too astronomical for us to use the other shed nets that we've used in the other but this is also another 40 percent shed net, but so you can see it's giving up in a few places, but generally we're quite happy with the fact that it's still holding up regardless of this size. And so some of the incidences that you actually see, stuff like that, giving up, so we've got to be patching up. So again, these are some of the incidences, so we've got to fix this. So it kind of tears apart quite easily compared to that other 40% Shednet, the green one in the other Shednet. So well, they say cheap is expensive, and unfortunately we're kind of paying for it, but I think we've gotten back our money, and pretty soon we're going to invest in that 40%, the green one. So we had some pepper in here, but then yeah, we have some lettuce now, and so still able to get some very good crop out of this Shednet. So we are able to accommodate quite a number of crops in here, because it's got like 10,000 plant population capacity in here. So from iceberg lettuce, we've got some broccoli and cauliflower here coming up, and then we're looking at bringing in some sweet pepper at the far end here. So quite a massive structure, and the team is now applying some manure at the far end here. We're going to plant some sweet pepper. So it's quite a huge structure, but generally we're kind of happy with the structural integrity, despite this net that's giving up. But it's not a surprise, it's something that we actually foresaw. So there you have it. I hope this has been quite a very comprehensive coverage of and appraisal of Shednet's different materials, from net, and then the poles that you can actually use. So from this mega Shednet, have a lovely one. And just in case you've got any further questions around Shadenet construction, I think you can always reach out. So like we've always indicated, I think greenhouse farming for us has actually been quite a game changer. But again, the cost of greenhouses is quite astronomical here in Zambia. You're talking about $15 to about $20 per square meter. So you can actually calculate for a structure like this, which is like 2,500 square meters, multiplied by about $20. So that's quite a bit. And so the bridging solution is to actually construct a shed net such as this one. I think you can actually start production from there, and then as the funds you raise more funds, you can then look at moving to a greenhouse. So this is a good starting point. And for us, actually, what we're doing is that as we get more greenhouses, then we also begin to migrate some of the production that was in open field, especially iceberg lettuce. It actually begins to come here in the shed nets. So that's something that we're doing. So you see that broccoli and cauliflower also, which we initially were doing in open field, is actually coming now in the shed net. And we've also been doing a lot of iceberg lettuce in open field, but it's also slowly getting migrated into the shed nets, given that we're now paving much more of sweet pepper production, actually kind of 100% into greenhouses, and somewhat also in shed nets. So it's a gradual process, migrating slowly. You don't have to be in a hurry. So that's something that you can actually look at in terms of just the transition from open field. But generally, I think we've gotten better crops, be it from the shed nets, but obviously much better in the the greenhouses. So yeah, the value proposition, I think, of protected environment is actually quite evident with our production profile. So no doubt about that. So all right, folks, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to come through to you and just give you some tidbits on our production infrastructure, and all sundry about farming. So from yours truly, Mr. Panuka, until next time, have a lovely one.